Highland Park is family. It's home.
It's community here.
It's where people come together.
Everybody pretty much knows everybody. Highland Park is a strong community.
It's a place of fun.
Everybody's welcome. We're unstoppable.
But I feel Highland Park strong.
Good evening. Great to have you with us. You're watching CBS News Chicago. I'm Joe Donlon.
And I'm Irika Sargent. It's been over a week since the Highland Park community was changed forever. Tonight, the city takes another step toward healing with a candlelight vigil. The
community is gathering right now to honor the memory of the 7 victims. Mayor Nancy Rotering is speaking right now. Let's listen in.
Why is that? Why did you do that today?
We are a community that is still working to recover from a deep and violent trauma. And it was important for us to be able to tell our community that we were coming together and that they could feel safe as we work towards healing together.
Mayor, what are your hopes for tonight?
To start to bring peace to a community that is in a lot of pain.
Have you heard from the family of Cooper Roberts at all, or any of the other victims who were shot but not deceased?
So I met several of them at some of the funerals, and we talked about their wounds and what their experiences entailed. We are absolutely trying to give all of these families the space that they need and they deserve to heal from this violent tragedy.
Do you know if Cooper is still in critical condition?
I'm not at liberty to say.
Mayor, what's next for Highland Park after the vigil?
We will continue to be a community. We will continue to support each other. We'll continue to provide food to people who are taking care of their loved ones in hospitals and who are working through their grief. We are a community that's strong, but right now we need to get back on our feet. We're also working to ensure that the parents of school kids and the kids who are looking towards returning to school in a month have the security and the confidence to go back into the classroom without fear.
Can you speak to the community's outpouring of support and all the outside groups that have come in to help?
We've been overwhelmed with the generosity and care and love, not just from within Highland Park, but across the country and across the world. It's been quite remarkable. It's really unfortunate that we needed to experience such a terrible tragedy. And we appreciate not only the resources from private individuals and corporations, but from the federal government, the state government, county, local. Everyone's been coordinating beautifully. But at the end of the day, it's a question about why. Why are we here? Why did we have to go through this, and why do others have to go through this?
Mayor, you mentioned the schools, and I'm sure the schools are working on plans. Day camps have also been working on plans. Some of them opened up on the 5th, Park District, this past Monday. What are your thoughts about, what do you have to say to the campers who are going, who are going back to day camp with their friends?
You deserve the opportunity to celebrate summertime with your friends and create great memories without fear. And so to that end, I'll be going to Washington next week to talk with the United States Senate Judiciary Committee to share this experience with them, this pain, this loss, and to beg them to get these combat weapons out of America's hands.
Mayor, the March 4th group that's in Washington today, trying to keep tabs on them. What's your message for them as they use this grassroots movement in D.C.?
We thoroughly appreciate their advocacy. We're sorry that they had to be founded out of their own tragedy. And at some point, we as a country need to have a reckoning and say, is this really how we want to go forth and live our lives? Nobody should have to be marching to beg for their life. That's not what this country was founded on. But in the end, that's what we saw on the 4th of July. That's what our parade turned into.
Mayor, can you talk about the last, week and some change since the shooting happened and what you've seen and what it's told you about your community?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
No problem. I'll get closer.
Yeah.
Can you talk about the last week and a half or however long it's been since the shooting and what you've seen and what it's told you about your community?
We are a community filled with caring, loving people who are very supportive of each other, but we also are a community that is still experiencing deep and profound pain. Every time I'm in Port Clinton Square, anytime I'm walking down the street, people are coming up to me with tears in their eyes, in need of a hug. We saw thousands of people going for trauma counseling at the high school. Those services will continue. And we know that it's reaching beyond Highland Park. We know that Highwood and North Chicago and Waukegan residents were also impacted by this. And frankly, it's brutality. It's horrible. So we are working on moving forward. We're so appreciative of everybody who's been trying to provide mental health care services and other resources, but we are still deep in our pain.
Mayor, a lot of everyday people are looking for ways to contribute to help. What's your message to them, whether they can help on a local level, whether they can help legislatively? How can they help if they're looking to?
I appreciate the question. I think it's twofold. One, donations are desperately going to be needed for the survivors in their recovery. We know that significant numbers of them have unbelievably complex wounds. Again, these are weapons created to destroy human life, and so those who are surviving are going to need a lot of care as they move forward in their recovery. And then I also need everybody to speak out. This doesn't need to be a way to live. We don't need to have these combat weapons in the United States. And when you heard President Biden's speech a few days ago, he talked about all the precautions that the military takes to make sure that people are all safe. These are military-grade weapons. We need to get them out of the United States.
Mayor, when you go to Washington next week, what do you hope comes out of that? What kinds of things will you need to do to make sure that happens?
My highest wish is that assault weapons get banned in the United States and large capacity magazines get banned in the United States. My next wish is for them to hear that we need to put in stronger background checks. We need to put in more of an understanding of what red flag laws are and how they can be effective. We also need to put in a law that says that people under 21 shouldn't be able to buy guns, period. But frankly, my goal and my goal forevermore in my life is going to be to get these combat weapons out of my country.
Mayor, the state legislature has tried and failed to pass an assault weapons ban. But the supermajority the Democrats have, we know it's not a Republican problem. What do you have to say to those Democrats who are blocking a ban in the state?
So we've been having significant conversations in the last week, both in terms of removing state preemption and allowing other municipalities to at least ban assault weapons, but we all know guns travel. And an assault weapons ban across the state of Illinois is clearly in the works. We've talked to a number of legislators, and it sounds like they are going to endeavor to move forward with that. That being said, we are surrounded by states with lax gun laws, and so it needs to be a national ban. Any other questions? Nope. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Annette.
We've been listening in on Highland Park Mayor Nancy Rotering, taking questions from the media and others in the crowd there for the last 10 minutes or so. This is leading up to the official vigil that will start at 7 o'clock. You heard a range of answers. They're talking about emphasizing how her community has come together to help those victims, their survivors, and the many ways that they will need that support physically and mentally, even bringing meals to those in need. She also spoke about, Joe, the condition. Well, she was asked about the condition of some of the victims, and I know we've been keeping a close eye on those, particularly that 8-year-old Cooper Roberts, but she at this point said she was not at liberty to disclose any of the updates to the survivors who may still be working through their injuries.
Right. We were in Highland Park on Monday, and in fact, we were reporting live just next to City Hall right here, which is actually away from the shooting scene. And when we were there, Irika, you could see still some of the leftover lawn chairs and strollers and personal items that were set up on the lawn of City Hall for residents to come by and pick up. But this is right across the street from the iconic Highland Park train station as well. You might have heard some of the trains going by a minute ago, but that sets the scene for tonight's vigil, which starts at 7 o'clock. You also heard some of the music from Highland Park Strings setting the scene, and the Chicago Pipe and Drums also performing as well, leading up to this 7 o'clock vigil. It's interesting, Irika, when you listen to a mayor like Nancy Rotering, and you wonder, someone who's the mayor of a town of 30,000, you never think as you're running for office that you're ever going to have to deal with something like this. And now look at her. I mean, she finds herself in Washington, D.C. with Governor Pritzker and with President Biden, and now a whole new fight that she, I'm sure, never even imagined.
Yeah, and unfortunately, you know, we've reported on several of these just within the last month. Her talking specifically about how she believes that this ban will be coming to Illinois from speaking to legislators here in the state. But, you know, you can tell that this is worn on her just within the last 9 days, having to go through this and being there to support her community. I know that also tonight, they plan to have several religious leaders here. They're trying to make sure they have a diverse group here to address this community, including a rabbi and a reverend from the Highland Park Presbyterian Church. And our Marissa Perlman is out here on the scene as well. We have various views for you here, from where the mayor was standing to the podium where they will start the vigil. You heard the strings. But Marissa, if you could tell us where exactly you are in relation to the City Hall, and just what are you seeing in terms of the outpouring of people who are already coming together to support Highland Park tonight?
Yeah, Joe, Irika, we're pretty much on the same block from where the mayor was taking questions from some of the media. And this is definitely the most formal memorial service we've seen in the 9 days after that accused gunman, you know, fired those 70 shots into a crowd at the 4th of July parade. And this is all, as you mentioned, playing out right here on the lawn of City Hall. You can hear the music already starting in the background. A crowd of at least 1,000 people, we're told, are expected here on the lawn here. And they actually, Joe mentioned that train station that's right across the street. They sectioned off a portion of the train station parking lot because they are expecting spillover of so many people coming here tonight to honor the lives of the 7 victims of this shooting that they, you know, needed more physical space. The streets around City Hall have been closed off to traffic. And as you mentioned, Irika, you know, we'll be hearing from faith leaders, city leaders, and the community who will come together to honor the 7 lives, but also the dozens of other gunshot victims that we've been talking about and sharing their stories with you. And of course, there will be talk about the lasting emotional impact that this will have on the Highland Park community, you know, forever. The mayor has said this will change her community forever. And she just said she will make it her life goal to, you know, gun reform. That will be her life's goal, to make change here in her community, but also across the country. A lot of prayers we're expecting tonight. As you mentioned, 8-year-old Cooper Roberts, who is still in critical condition, paralyzed from the waist down after a bullet severed his spinal cord. We've been speaking with people here in the community. A lot of people have been asking about his condition and how he's doing, and you heard somebody ask the mayor about his condition as well. You know, and we're having this conversation tonight as that group of moms is rallying in Washington, D.C. right now to talk about gun reform as they share their story of the trauma that the entire Highland Park community is going through, and calling on Congress for change. So it's expected to be an emotional ceremony, one that neighbors are telling us that is needed. They're calling for a space to be together to start the healing process. Joe, Irika.
Yeah, Marissa, the thing we noticed when we were out there on Monday, and the mayor mentioned it as well, the fact that people were sort of addressing one another and then hugging. They all just sort of needed that hug. I was right there at the Walker Brothers where the shooting happened, and there was a woman who approached a police officer, and they just hugged and held each other for a minute or two. Are you seeing that already? Because it felt like Monday those hugs were at least helping in the healing process. Monday felt like, as I said, Monday is sort of a transformative day.
Yeah, absolutely. As the crowd starts to gather here on the lawn of City Hall, we're seeing a couple of things. Yes, people are hugging each other, and you've heard it, 1,000 times probably so far since our coverage began last week, but everybody here in Highland Park knows somebody, and so you can just see the vast impact of this on this community. People just holding each other a little bit tighter, people thanking the Highland Park Police and Fire. In fact, there are signs around the lawn here. There's one directly behind us that says, "Thank you, Highland Park Police and Fire, for the work that they've done since the tragedy." We've seen the Red Cross here, and they've been handing out Highland Park Strong ribbons. I'm actually wearing one right now, and also some of these candles that the entire community here on the lawn will be able to participate and light those candles. And one thing that kind of touched me, Joe, was we saw, as they get ready for this memorial service to start in just a couple of minutes, but we saw Highland Park Police carrying 2 huge bags of stuffed teddy bears, and there's a bunch of kids here who are already out on the lawn, and those kids will of course be getting the teddy bears, but they've also been handing them out to the adults here who are on the lawn. So you can tell, they might need that little bit of comfort. It sounds silly how a teddy bear might make a big impact, but I've seen grown adults' eyes light up by being handed a stuffed animal from a police officer. So you can just feel the impact on the community here.
Yeah, and Marissa, we were noting that one of the performers out there is the Chicago Pipe and Drums. We've seen people from outside of this community come together to support them, including, I know, just on Monday we were speaking with a baseball coach who said in the middle of competition, their opponents from Wilmette wore those ribbons, those orange ribbons that they had, and posters to support. I'm wondering if you've had a chance to speak to any of the people, get a sense for how many people are coming from outside the Highland Park community to also embrace them and share in this vigil tonight.
Yeah, I think a lot of that also comes with the music that we're going to hear tonight. The Highland Park Strings, the Chicago Pipe and Drums. The Chicago community kind of travels with them, and so we've spoken with a couple of people who are with those 2 organizations, but they told us, I talked with a young boy who was about 10 years old, and he's part of the Pipe and Drums organization, and he plays, and he was telling me he wanted to be here to support Highland Park. He's not from here, he's from the city of Chicago, but somebody told me north, south, east, or west, wherever you're from in the Chicago area, you will have support, and that's what we're seeing here already.
Yeah. There's so many things that we noticed and that were obvious on Monday, and the response to the memorial certainly stood out to me. There were 2. One right there in the square, and then another one a little bit farther down the street near the railroad tracks. Both of them featured pictures of the 7 victims who died, and they were propped up on easels and on chairs and other areas. And the response to people who went by to watch was really incredible. I mean, many of them were crying, many of them were taking pictures, and many of them were spending a long time reflecting as they sat and looked at the growing memorial of flowers and the pictures of these victims and the impact of what happened on the 4th of July. It was almost like they were trying to reconcile it just through the pictures of these victims tonight and the memorials that were growing. But, we talked too about the young victims. When we were out there Monday, Irika, they had therapy horses. And they allowed kids to come in and pet the horses like you've heard of therapy dogs. And
right.
It was a huge crowd. They asked us not to take pictures of it, so we didn't. But it's just one of the many ways that community is trying to heal.
Yeah. And you can hear this beautiful music in the background. We want to give you a moment to enjoy that. Before we do, I'd like to read the names of the 7 people that lost their lives. Many of those funerals have happened already, and we've been following the efforts to support them through donations. But I want to give you those names once again and then give you a moment to listen to this music that is in their honor and in the honor of the survivors. So we're talking about Catherine Goldstein of Highland Park, Irina McCarthy, and her husband Kevin McCarthy of Highland Park. They are the ones that have that 2-year-old who the GoFundMe page at last check was over $3.2 million raised to support him as he's now going to have to continue his life without both of his parents. We also have Jacqueline Sundine. Steve Strauss of Highland Park, Steve Strauss. Nicholas Toledo of Morelos, Mexico. He was actually their visiting family, and that's why he was at the parade. And Eduardo Uvaldo, I believe that he is from Waukegan. So those are the 7 people who lost their lives, and there were more than 30 additional victims who sustained so many life-changing injuries. We want to give you a few moments here to enjoy the music. It's in somewhat a similar way to when they had that moment of silence on Monday, right there in the middle of downtown Highland Park, to just reflect on, what has changed this community forever.
Just went by with the rock. Place it. I said, take your time. No, I could tell. I wasn't.
You are watching a vigil that's about to get underway, and the crowd is gathering at City Hall in Highland Park. Some 1,000 expected to attend tonight's vigil. You're listening to the Highland Park Strings. They will also be part of the vigil, which begins here just in a few minutes. My guess is they'll probably play another song, possibly two, and then begin the vigil, which will include, as Irika has mentioned, a number of clergy members and also the mayor, Nancy Rotering, who will speak as well. It's expected to last somewhere around an hour.
Yes, and the mayor already coming forward even before it started around 6:30 to share her answers to various questions from the media, including how so many in Highland Park are already receiving so much support, including donations to those who have survived, to the families of those who did not, who lost their lives, the various ways that they still need help, including mental and physical health care for so many of them there. And I know she and other leaders within that community have talked about how it's unfortunate that it took a situation like this, but to see the outpouring of support within her community is really, inspiring. And I think about on Monday, right when we were out there and a rainstorm moved in, and then so many people around the town I know were saying, did you see the rainbow? Did you see the rainbow over downtown? And I think that they were inspired by it. It lifted their spirits, and to see such a symbol over the city who really has to rebuild, I think it says a lot about the optimism in the town of Highland Park.
Well, when you heard the mayor mention, too, the fact that they offered trauma treatments at the high school, and dozens upon dozens of people showed up. And I think it also was telling on Monday the number of people who were willing to just openly talk about what they were going through. Normally you think you sort of have to compartmentalize it and process it yourself, but it became pretty clear that people in Highland Park wanted to be together. They wanted to come together and share, and you saw that at the memorials. There were people in groups of 4 and 5, many of them teenagers, who came to the memorial together and held hands and cried as they stood in front of the memorial. But there was a gentleman I talked with at the restaurant there on Monday. I just sort of asked him how he was doing, and he said, a little better, but it's going to take time. And every time he came back, he talked a little bit more and more about what he'd gone through on Monday. He was at the restaurant right at the intersection where the shooting happened. His daughter was with him at the restaurant, and he recounted, the stories of the people running into the restaurant to escape the gunfire, some of them injured. The medical personnel who came in to treat the injured. I mean, and it hit me, Irika, too, as we talked about Monday. When you are on the street and you see it in person, it definitely impacts you, because you can picture where the gunman was on the rooftop, and you can see the streets, and you can it is a small main street that you could find anywhere across America, and you just know that from here on out they'll always think of that. That's what that 4th of July will always represent, unfortunately. And the guest we talked with on Monday said that that was not going to be the case, and they were going to do all they could to not let that happen, and that they were going to make the parade next year even bigger and better.
Right. And you spoke about the businesses. So many of them remain closed for days and days afterwards. And then to see them fill up with people coming back into the downtown, the central business district, to try and support those businesses, just to be there together to talk through, their feelings, their fears for the recovery, their hopes for what could be next. You saw just within days these people coming together, and I know as we were heading out of Highland Park after our newscast there on Monday, there was at least one restaurant that was closed for private events, where they were allowing them to have space to heal together. Certainly understandable that while they want the outside, support, in some ways they're unfortunately bonded by something so tragic that only they, in many ways, will understand. But we have one of our reporters, Tim McNicholas, in D.C., because you've seen that this has really galvanized people in this community and surrounding communities to travel to share their message. Highland Park Strong, as you see on this T-shirt here, but also one of reform for assault weapons. And our Tim McNicholas spoke to a mom who helped gather people from not just this tragedy, but from Uvalde, Texas as well, coming together in D.C. to fight for change that they hope will impact and make their community and communities around the country safer. And you can see here just what we were talking about, these people embracing in those shirts, Highland Park strong, HP strong, the smiles on their faces, even in the midst of all of this. And coming up to support the quartet. That's also a beautiful thing. I'm sure they're volunteering their time to really set such a beautiful mood here as this vigil gets ready to take start.
Well, you can see, the crowd is definitely filling in. Let's check back in with Marissa Perlman. She's on site there for us. Marissa, it looks like the crowd has definitely arrived now.
Yeah, definitely. Just in the past couple of minutes, we have seen the crowd grow. That music was growing louder too, but again, now quieting down as the official ceremony gets ready to begin. And we're just watching the crowd to be kind of on the outskirts of all that is happening here. I've been able to just watch these community members come together, and it's a lot of just hugging and tears and a little bit of smiles. You know, they're having conversations, obviously talking about the tragedy, but you can tell that everybody here is happy to be together. And again, the music just getting started here to my right. Again, the Chicago pipe and drums and the Highland Park strings coming together to kick off this ceremony. And we're expected to hear from a couple of people. This is one of the first kind of official memorial services that we've seen since the tragedy. This is a city-led memorial service, and we're going to hear from some faith leaders, including Rabbi Ike Sirota. He's from a temple, Makom Salel Lakeside, nearby here. We're going to hear again from the mayor, who has some remarks about her fight for gun reform, and will honor the lives of those 7 victims from last week's shooting. And then we're going to hear from Reverend Quincy Worthington from the Highland Park Presbyterian Church, another leader here in this community. And then we're going to hear from Carlos Sims from the Ravinia Festival Jazz Scholar. And again, the crowd here expected to be in the thousands. We're already seeing overflow into the parking lot across the street. Young, old, therapy animals are here on site. The Red Cross here to answer any questions, offering their services. And you know, one of the other things that the mayor has spoken about and the community members have shared with us since last week's tragedy is about how important mental health is going to be in their recovery process. You know, last week we spoke with a mom and her young daughter. This recent high school graduate who got the call that nobody wants to hear, is that her parents were at the parade and they had both been shot and were at the hospital. And they both shared with me, this is what's happening in their community is both of their biggest fears. This high school student goes to school looking for exits everywhere, and that's how her brain has been trained as she grows up. And then she got that call that her parents were involved in a mass shooting. And they both shared with me that talking about it, now Joe, you were talking about how open this community has been, and sharing stories of what happened and talking about it and being open with their feelings is something I'm speaking with multiple people about tonight and over the past week about how they need to share and talk to move forward. And that process seems to be starting here tonight outside of City Hall on the lawn here with thousands of people from the Highland Park community.
Yeah, Marissa, we could see the transition there, actually hear the transition as you were speaking there, from the strings to the Chicago pipe and drums. And now let's listen in.
Lakeside congregation here in Highland Park. I'm deeply honored to be here this evening. I'd like to thank Mayor Rodering and the City Council for the invitation. I'd like to thank everyone here for their leadership during this time of crisis. A week ago at a gathering in my synagogue, I said it's too soon to speak of healing when we're still in the depths of mourning. And that is still true tonight. It is hard to speak of healing when we are in these depths. It may be true for a long time to come. It will be a long time before we can walk these streets or in any town without looking to the rooftops for danger from above. It will be a long time before we can say the name Highland Park to someone who asks us where we come from without hearing their saddened knowing, oh, the way we do when we hear names like Columbine and Newtown. In this moment, we are, as the psalm tells us, walking through the valley of the shadow of death. We are still in that shadow, remembering those who were murdered, praying for those injured, and standing with those traumatized by these horrific moments to slowly step forward together. Because we cannot stop to linger in this valley. It's too soon to say what we've learned, but already knowing that we can care for one another in our community, and also knowing we can reach out to those in need in other parts of our city and our nation. The psalm says, I will fear no evil. And while we have our anxieties, we will not give in to fear. We go forward with the faith and conviction that the problems that face us are not insoluble. And one day, with hard and determined work, we will see the other side of the valley. Healing is perhaps a tiny glimmer in the distance, but each of us is a light. Each of us can do some good. Each of us can spread some kindness. Each of us can make some change. Each of us can strive to bring some badly needed light into our darkened world.
With heavy hearts, we welcome you here tonight.
Con gran pesar les damos la bienvenida esta noche.
Well, I'm so proud of our community for coming together. I wish it were not because of a tragic act of violence.
Si bien estoy muy orgullosa de nuestra comunidad por unirse de esta manera, desearía que no fuera por un trágico acto de violencias con armas.
The July 4th mass shooting was the bloodiest day we have ever experienced in Highland Park, caused by a hateful and cowardly individual who opened fire with an assault weapon during our annual July 4th hometown tradition.
El tiroteo masivo del 4 de julio fue el día más sangriento que jamás hayamos experimentado en Highland Park, causado por un individuo lleno de odio y cobarde que abrió fuego con un arma de fuego durante nuestra tradición anual del 4 de julio.
7 individuals were senselessly murdered, dozens more were injured, and countless numbers of our children and community members have been traumatized.
7 personas fueron asesinadas sin sentido, docenas más resultaron heridas e innumerables niños y miembros de nuestra comunidad han quedado traumatizados.
Tonight, we mourn for those who were murdered. We mourn for their families. We mourn for their friends. We mourn for their neighbors. We mourn for our community.
Esta noche lloramos por aquellos que fueron asesinados, lloramos por sus familias, lloramos por sus amigos, lloramos por sus vecinos y lloramos por nuestra comunidad.
We say the names of those who were taken from us as we remember them. They were brothers, sisters, husbands, wives, mothers, fathers, grandparents, cousins, friends, neighbors, colleagues, and so much more.
Decimos los nombres de aquellos que nos fueron arrebatados a medida que los recordamos. Eran hermanos, hermanas, esposos, esposas, madres, padres, abuelos, primos, amigos, vecinos, colegas y mucho más.
Catherine Goldstein of Highland Park, Irina McCarthy of Highland Park, Kevin McCarthy of Highland Park, Jacqueline Sondheim of Highland Park, Stephen Strauss of Highland Park, Nicolas Toledo Zaragoza of Morelos, Mexico, Eduardo Uvaldo of Waukegan. A moment of silence, please.
Vamos a guardar un momento de silencio, por favor.
The trauma of gun violence doesn't end when the shooting stops. Experiencing gun violence in our community has a lasting impact on all of us. We are all survivors. Each of us will have a different experience and a different timeline as we find a way to move forward into our new normal.
El trauma de la violencia armada no termina cuando cesan los disparos. Experimentar la violencia con armas en nuestra comunidad tiene un impacto duradero en nosotros. Somos los sobrevivientes. Cada uno de nosotros tendrá una experiencia diferente y una línea de tiempo distinta a medida que encontremos una manera de avanzar hacia nuestra nueva normalidad.
It is incumbent upon each and every one of us to honor those taken and those injured.
Aquellos sea lo que sea que esto signifique para ustedes y los suyos.
As we face the ugly truth of what happened here, we are reminded of the fragility and vulnerability of life.
Al enfrentar la fea verdad de lo que sucedió aquí, recordamos la fragilidad y vulnerabilidad de nuestras vidas.
It forces us to put things in perspective, challenges us to expand our understanding of how things work, and connects us with one another in profound ways.
Nos obliga a poner las cosas en perspectiva, nos desafía a expandir nuestra comprensión de cómo funcionan las cosas y nos conectan unos a otros de manera profunda.
We will keep those murdered in our hearts and in our minds as we work to resolve that this evil attack will not define who we are, nor will it define how we treat each other.
Mantendremos a los que murieron en nuestros corazones y en nuestras mentes mientras trabajamos para que este terrible ataque no defina quiénes somos, ni definirá cómo nos tratemos unos a otros.
We will recognize our common humanity as we live our lives.
Reconoceremos nuestra humanidad en común mientras continuemos viviendo nuestras vidas.
We acknowledge that the intensity of our grief and suffering represents the depth of the love that we hold for our neighbors and our hometown.
Reconocemos que la intensidad de nuestro dolor y sufrimiento representa la profundidad del amor que tenemos por nuestros vecinos y por esta nuestra ciudad.
We will listen to each other's stories and understand that in each and every story there is love, loss, and a need for hope.
Escucharemos la historia de los demás y entenderemos que en todas y cada una de nuestras historias hay amor, pérdida y una necesidad de esperanza.
We will care for each other and provide strength when it is needed most.
Nos cuidaremos unos a otros y brindaremos fuerza cuando más lo necesiten.
And with time, this will carry us through.
Con el tiempo, esto nos ayudará.
This is who we are. We are Highland Park, and we are strong together.
Esto es lo que somos. Somos Highland Park y somos fuertes, juntos.
We will now light candles to honor this time of mourning as we grieve the loss of those who were taken by senseless gun violence and those who were injured and are struggling to recover.
Ahora encenderemos velas para honrar este tiempo de luto mientras lamentamos la pérdida de aquellos que nos fueron arrebatados por la violencia con armas sin sentido y aquellos que resultaron heridos y ahora luchan por recuperarse.
We promise to hold them in our hearts and to honor their legacies.
Prometemos tenerlos en nuestros corazones y honrar sus legados. Is that okay?
My name is Reverend Quincy Worthington. I'm the pastor at Highland Park Presbyterian Church. And now as we go from this place, my dear friends, let us remember that our thoughts and our prayers, they do matter, but so do our actions. Let us now take the broken pieces of our heart and fit them back together collectively into one giant heart for our community and beyond. Let us now remember the more perfect union we were called to be in the visions of our forebears, who foresaw the better angels of our nature and understood certain rights, certain truths to be self-evident, and certain rights to be unalienable, life being chiefly among them. Let us cling to the dream of a prophet proclaimed in the heart of our capital at the feet of the great emancipator, urging us to fight physical force with soul force. The dream passed down through the ages by our prophets that one day every valley shall be exalted, every hill and mountain shall be made low, the rough places made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight. And we will beat our weapons of death and destruction into tools that sustain and nurture life. A life where our children no longer have to fear for their safety or run for cover. A life where they are free to be fully human and not dehumanized into targets. A life where they are fully seen and fully known and not pushed into thinking that terroristic acts of evil are their only resort. Let us go from here not in the valley, but knowing in the person next to you. Let's go from here not bitter and angry, but in knowing that our dreams and our hopes for a better tomorrow are a certain reality if we work together for them. Let us go from here not thinking that this is over, that this service somehow brings some end, but in knowing that now our hard work begins protecting and caring for our sisters and brothers from the avenues of Highland Park to the streets of Inglewood, from the shores of Lake Michigan to the banks of the Rio Grande, from the Bean in downtown Chicago to the Beanheads down in Washington, D.C. Now, when our legitimate differences threaten to tear us apart, let our universal commonality bind us together that much stronger, that we're all precious in the eyes of God. Each life has intrinsic value, that any blood is too sacred to be spilt needlessly on our streets. Now begins our hard work of ensuring the safety, the freedom, the humanity of each precious child of God given to our care. And let us not rest until the massacres and traumas just a week behind us never happened to any community or any person ever again. Let us not rest until our dreams are a reality. Let us not rest until our love proves too much for the special interest lobby to overcome. And so now, as this vigil ends, my dear family, now our hard work begins.
You have been watching a vigil tonight in Highland Park, and you've been listening now to the Chicago Pipe and Drums and Irika Sargent, Joe Donlon, along with you here on CBS News Chicago. Several things stand out, Irika, from the many words we heard tonight, but one of them, I think, perhaps, that struck me was from Rabbi Ike Serrata, who said, how can we talk about healing when we are still in the depths of mourning? They said that last week. He said he still felt like that tonight, but clearly this is another step in that critical process of healing for this city.
Yes, it was such a moving vigil, and speaking to so many in that community, the mayor having her remarks in both English and Spanish, right, especially acknowledging the large Hispanic population there and the fact that at least two of the victims that lost their lives were of Hispanic or Latin descent. So I think definitely sending a message there by sharing her remarks in both English and Spanish. And what she said to end it was, we promise to hold them in our hearts and to honor their legacies. And with that, several minutes there where you saw thousands of people light these candles and join in solidarity with so many in this community, including what we saw there towards the end of that candle lighting ceremony was Reverend Jesse Jackson in the crowd there, joining them, coming from Chicago. So definitely an enormous turnout to support the people of Highland Park.
It's a beautiful building, the City Hall building there, and it's right next to the oldest structure in Highland Park, so there's a lot of history and more history made tonight. If it's happening in or around Chicago, you will see it right here on CBS News Chicago. We appreciate you joining us for the vigil tonight.
And we will have more on this and updates on the stories that are coming out of Highland Park about the survivors, the victims, and ways that you can help on our news tonight at 10. We'll see you then.